Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 11. Time flies when you're getting real. Episode 11 of the Your Relationship Workbench series. And today we're going to talk about communication. But first, let me communicate in case you're seeing this and me for the first time. I'm Geoff Laughton. I'm your host. And I am also your relationship architect at yourrelationshiparchitect.com. And why I wanted to talk about communication today is because of a few things. First of all, let me take those off. Um, Really, one key element that is essential, mandatory, lifeblood, call it what you will, for the health of any relationship, not just a romantic one, but any relationship. One thing needed for that to be healthy is communication. And so, in general, on the one hand, there are a lot of things about communication that aren't particularly different in a quarantine than it would be if life was normal. Such things as do communicate. Communicating is better than no communication. The other thing is you want to do your best to communicate respectfully. Another thing that you would do in or out of quarantine is that you speak for yourself when you are communicating. Even if you're communicating about a problem or an upset you have with your partner or your friend, you need to communicate as if it is all about you, because most of the time it is. You're upset with something they've done, said, didn't do, didn't say, and it's all built most of the time. It's usually going to be about your expectations, your assumptions, what you're wanting. Often, it isn't even communicated ahead of time, and so then it's disappointing, you get upset. So I want to really point out that if you are in a pandemic or not, when you're communicating, speak for yourself. Share what your experience is rather than going, you know what, you're really a schmuck because you said this or that. So there's just a handful of things that you would do whether we were in quarantine or not. But I do want to address some things that are different. So the first thing I'll point to is that in this time, if you are in a relationship and you live together, and if you have children, family there in your household, communications are going to be probably more wacky than not, because we're not used to having our partner and or our kids home all the time, 7 days a week, week after week. So that is frankly going to bring some shit up. And whenever stuff comes up, when we get triggered, and in case you don't know what triggered means, it means somebody can say something like, I really love your hair today, though I think you should have gone with the red shirt. And all of a sudden, you want to rip their head off. So you're going from 0 to red line reaction like that. That's what I mean by triggered. And when we get triggered, remember, we're not triggered about what's happening right now most of the time. Oftentimes, we're more triggered by something that has just surfaced in memory by what somebody has done or said in this moment. but it opens up an old wound that we don't even know is still in there until that lucky person that triggers us brings it into our awareness. So when everybody's living in close quarters, unless you're somebody who happens to live in a 4 or 5 or 12,000 square foot house where there's plenty of room to hide from each other. But if you're like, what I make up to be your average American or European person, you're living in a reasonably sized house or maybe a small house, and you're all packed in together all the time. It's going to bring some things up. So, what do I want to say about how it needs to be different? The first thing is there's never been a more important time to do your best to communicate compassionately. In talking with a couple I worked with yesterday, they were sharing about how the husband made a comment, the wife got offended or hurt, and then kind of attacked him back because she felt she was being attacked. That wasn't at all his intention. And and he brought an energy to replying to her. So it turned into a pissing match between each other. That's never a really productive strategy anyway, but while we're still sheltered in place at home, you really need to try to bring compassion, because regardless of your circumstances, if you are furloughed or you've been laid off or you're working from home and maybe your partner's working from home and you have kids, everybody, one way or the other, is being really, really stretched right now. And I think it's important to try and keep that front of mind. And when we are stressed, we don't usually bring our best self to the table. That doesn't mean you can't. It just means that our stress tends to bring up our more, let's say, fear-based interpretations, our own fear-based way of responding or reacting to things. So you really need to drop into here when you can be speaking with compassion and caring. You're going to be heard a lot better. Now, when we're upset and we have been triggered, it's not easy to do what I just said. You have to the best you can, you want to have an intention that you're going to do that. So here's a quarantine specific suggestion about how you deal with a sudden upset and you're triggered and you want to, rip your partner's head off, metaphorically or literally. So that is, if you're having a normal conversation and all of a sudden the other person says something and you get triggered, the first thing you ought to do, that's more important to do now. This is not a bad thing to do at any point, but if you're all quarantined together, the best thing you can do first is actually just say, time out, excuse me, I'm triggered. Don't go right into telling them why or what's been triggered, if for no other reason, then you probably don't know yet. But you need to say, time out, and I'm going to go work on this. If you're able to go outside, go outside. If you can't go outside for some reason, if there's another room in the house where you can close the door and just sit down, wherever you go, the thing to do is to sit down. Recommend you take about 20 slow, deep breaths and think back what was said to you that got you to suddenly be pissed off or to shut down. Sometimes it won't be anger, it'll just be hurt. And when we get hurt or disappointed by something, a lot of us shut down. We either attack or we shut down. So whatever it is, first get present, get in your body, which is why the breath. Then look and see, okay, what got said that suddenly completely changed my state? And rerun it in the TV monitor in your head. And what was it about that could have possibly gotten you so upset or hurt or disappointed? You want to look at that, and then where has that happened before? Not with your partner so much as in your past somewhere. Where have you felt that way before? Then you can go back and remember a time, and then you can tell yourself, it's about that. And whatever I've thought that meant about me, is that true now? And no, it isn't. But it can reveal a sensitivity that maybe you and your partner have run into before. So if that's the case, it helps bring you back into present time. And then it helps you be able to go back to your partner, no longer in that charge. And you're able to say to them, here's what got triggered. Here's where it came from. And now I know why I've had this reaction with you before. And here's what I'm going to practice to work on it in the future. You may not need anything from your partner other than to hear that. So there's a concrete process you can do. And the hardest part of it is going to be actually slamming the brake on the reaction that wants to come anytime we get triggered. And to just stop, take the break, go move that energy, get clear what it's really about, and then come back and share with your partner. Okay, what else do you want to do differently in quarantine? One of the things I also recommend, and I actually got a question from somebody who's been watching these, and I'm going to share it, and then I'll address it because I do think being in quarantine ups the stakes. I firmly believe that truth is love's doorway. In other words, when we are honest and open about our true thoughts and feelings, it creates an environment in which love and affinity can flourish in relationships. My question is how best to do that when the other person involved is either unwilling to acknowledge there is an issue or doesn't have the capacity to speak their truth without blame, shame, or guilt. I appreciate your consideration and look forward to any insights you can offer. Okay, so again, because so many emotions are heightened, more likely to come up because of stress, fear, burnout, any number of things that are going on during a quarantine time, that the first thing to realize is that if you need to communicate to someone and you want to kind of read their energy and look and see if they're open, do they feel open? If someone's like this. What do you want? Sure, you can talk to me. You're not going to want to communicate anything to them in that moment because they're not available. She used the word capacity. If they don't have the capacity. So rule one here is don't try and work through a conflict with the other person if in that moment they don't feel to you like they've got the room. Or ask them explicitly, I'd love to work through something with you to help us get closer. Do you have the capacity? Do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the space? You can use any of those ways of saying it to do that, to listen. And if they say no, then ask for a time when they think they would. If it's someone that chronically has a pretty hard time hearing you without going to blame, shame, or guilt, then really the first thing I would do if I were you is look at what are you getting from being with somebody who can't go beyond blame, shame, and guilt. What issue are you working out in an unconscious and awkward way that the only way you know or the pattern you have is to allow yourself to be beaten up by other people emotionally and verbally? Now, if it's someone who isn't there all the time, but that's where they're going in a particular moment, then with a soft energy, you can say, I'm really feeling like you're being harsh with me. I'm experiencing your energy as blaming, shaming, or guilting. Is that what you're intending? Do a reality check. See what's up. Then maybe that can get them to soften. You can make a request to have them soften. Would you just be willing to soften your energy a little bit? If they're a no to all that, then you need to just say, all right, I'll come back another time, and then go off and look and see, particularly if this is a repetitive pattern, why am I with this person? It's not an invitation to dump them on the spot, but it is about taking full responsibility for what you're experiencing, not their behavior, but what you're experiencing and what you allow yourself to keep experiencing. Work with that. See what's up there. Okay? If it's a recurring problem that you want to keep coming back to them and trying to get something across, you could also ask them if they are open. Okay, my experience, notice I'm owning my experience. Rather than saying, you just never seem to get me, you can say, my experience is that whenever I try and talk with you about humana subject, this pattern between us keeps emerging. So can you give me any sense or any idea or any requests of how I can communicate more effectively for you so that I'm heard, you feel heard, and we can work through this? Can't hurt. You got nothing to lose by making that request. Rather than rather than fully trusting whatever your ego is making up moment to moment to moment to moment as a reaction to not getting what you want from the other person in that moment, your ego would just be making shit up, interpreting what's happening through its own filter that already presupposes that there's something wrong. When you have a conflict, people, There's nothing wrong. Conflict is a normal, necessary, and can be a healthy thing if you know how to work with it well. So break a pattern, soften, and see what might be going on. Try and actually feel into the other person. Because with someone with whom you usually can communicate well with more often than not, and all of a sudden the wall is up, it's up, and you're not feeling like you're getting through, well, they're triggered. That's why that's happening. Odds are slim, unless you have chronic problems in your marriage or relationship is completely dysfunctional. They're not hearing you or opening with you either because your energy is tight, their energy is tight, they feel you're triggered, and or they're triggered. And if they're triggered, it's crucial to realize that when we get triggered, we do what I call going young. We get young. Old wounds, young energy comes up. And then we're responding and reacting like we're about 7. So it's always better, if that's going on, to just stop and take a deep breath and look and see if it really is the time to try and handle whatever's up. It may not be. So if it isn't, well then, just call a timeout. I'll be back. Let's do this later. And go move on to the next thing. Okay. I actually think that's enough, other than remembering that when we get scared, and I've said this before in other videos, if you're never getting anxious, afraid, hopefully not incapacitatingly so, but if you've gone through this pandemic so far without concern, anxiety, some fear, worry, I'm not a fan of all those emotions, by the way, but we all have them. It happens. If none of that was going on for you, I'd be concerned at how heavily you've walled yourself up, kind of like, oh, I hope it goes away soon. When you realize that those kinds of emotions are coming up, that should, in my opinion, engender compassion. Some patient, like just, okay, if my partner suddenly goes off, I'm going to assume that they're scared. So maybe I would say, even if they're throwing shame, blame, or guilt, can I be the bigger person in the moment? Or not bigger, I don't want to say that. Can I be the more resourced and resourceful person in this exchange and suddenly soften myself, let go of my agenda, and be able to say, is there something that you're worried or afraid of right now? They won't be expecting that. And if you're accurate that there is, and you ask that question, it has a really good shot at getting them to kind of snap out of their reaction and look, well, yeah, I am. Because they didn't see it because they were triggered. So rather than fight trigger with trigger, or, defense with more offense, take the move to step back and see what happens. Try to get them make it more about them temporarily so that they can soften, and then you've got room to do what you need to do. So, if any of that doesn't make sense, feel free to say so in the comments, ask questions, and I'm going to look at some here. Okay, you're welcome. The person who sent that question in was just saying thank you for responding to it. So be kind to yourself and your loved ones where you can. Be responsible for your own energy, your own emotional state. And responsible, by the way, can be thought of as response able. Able to respond as opposed to just puking out reactivity. Those are things to shoot for. I think it's more challenging right now. But because I also believe that what's going on is an enormous reset opportunity, here's a chance to muck around with how you normally do a lot of things and see if there's not a more effective, more rewarding, more resourceful way to do things in any area where you're caught in a rut. Use this odd, difficult time as a leverage point for your own growth. And that will have a growthful impact, one way or the other, on your relationship. All right, everybody, that's it for today. The wrap up is coming in episode 12. If you're watching this on replay and you have questions, then please feel free to either put them in the comments box or messenger me your questions. If you have a hot topic that you think would be the perfect wind up to this 4-week series, please send it to me. And I don't know, I think it will be a spiritually oriented wrap up, but I'm open. So thank you for your time and attention that you've given. For those of you that have been watching a lot of these, thank you. If you're looking at it newly, I hope you find them helpful. And I will be back in a couple days. And I wish you the best possible day. Make it the best possible day, unless you have other plans. All right, everybody. Till next time.